Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the board meeting of the Ebbsfleet Development Corporation. We're here in Ebbsfleet. Good groundbreaking event this morning with Countryside and Clarion on the Ashmere development. So excellent to see them making further progress on that. We're going to start with today's business. We're recording this. This will go onto our website later on in the day. Do we have any apologies for absence? I know that we have Fred Marudis, who's online, just because he developed a little cough and sniffles earlier on, so we're going to be cautious about COVID. But other than that, any apologies?
Yeah, we have apologies from Councillor Kite, Councillor Murphy, Simon Blanchflower. We are expecting Councillor Burton to join us shortly. Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. Any declarations of interest other than the standing declarations of interest for the members of our planning committee? No? All right. Then we have in front of us part 1 minutes of our meeting of the 7th of September 2022. Can I assume that people are happy with those and they reflect true and fair meeting?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everyone. Actions. Where are we on actions, James? Ian, is there anything that we should be focusing on?
Just 3 that are open, Simon. The first one is the waste transfer management station that's due to come back in November with an update. The hybrid working policy we've left open, but the board agreed that it should be reviewed after 6 months, so that's time limited for early 23. And then the third one, there's an update to that action there, which was in respect of the report on the Blue Lake project approval. And as is noted in the update, the report has been shared with the Chair of ARAC and he's agreed to next steps, which will include a meeting with the other ARAC committee members, which are within the document. So.
Great. All right. Thank you for that. And I think that takes us on to our first substantive part 1 paper of the day, which is Ian, your Chief Executive's report.
Thank you. And I've just realised that there are 3 actions on the next page of the actions log, which are also still open, but hopefully members can have viewed those already and see that they're not due back yet. So,
yeah. Yes, Neil.
On one of those actions, Alcadon, it's got to be confirmed as when. When do we think that's going to come back?
Difficult to say, Neil, because it's the developers that are conducting the review. We think that's still ongoing, but we're in their hands as to when that comes back. I think the review is part of other considerations around cost increases that they're experiencing on other bits of infrastructure in Whitecliff. So I would say probably not before the beginning of the year, but could be later than that.
Can I, Chair, can we request some information from them so that we get a clearer idea of when?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much for that. Ian, perhaps you'd like to take us through your report.
Yeah. So just to take that largely as read, Chair, but there's a couple of things to note and effectively a decision for the board to agree the participation in the board apprenticeship scheme, which is being run by central government. Some details are set out in the paper on that, but it would be good for the board who will have to participate in this and have somebody around the table as the apprentice when that happens to endorse our participation in that. The only thing to say is to the investment zones item, as board members will know, our submission did go in by the deadline on the 14th of October, and it focused on the area of Ebbsfleet Central East, which is also the subject of our outline planning application that was submitted recently. So that has gone in. We were expecting, as 4.3 says, that ministers wish to decide which proposals they want to take through to the next stage fairly swiftly. We haven't got a sort of an updated timetable for that now, but we'll obviously keeping in close contact with the officials in the department. Nothing else to say on one, but happy to take any questions.
Right, board, are there any comments or observations on this? Yes, Barry.
Thank you. Well, we talked investments in separate, so I won't comment on that further. But I was just curious about the board apprenticeship program, just, but I think it's a great thing. But in reality, as we all know, you experienced board members, how are we going to make sure that this individual will gel? And do we interview potential candidates or just allocate to somebody? And the second thing is, how do we make sure to sign some sort of confidentiality agreement or whatever? Again, if someone's generally a novice, there is a risk. Which is something.
Yeah, James, you've been on the calls with the department recently. I don't know whether those sort of details have come up.
Certainly, we don't get to interview the candidate. We are just given it if we join the programme, so we don't get that. On the confidentiality, I'm not sure, but I'm sure we can ask them to sign something.
Okay, so both issues are worth watching, I would suggest.
Yeah.
Certainly been on boards where there's been complete disruption just because of personalities sometimes. So,
Yeah, I think I may have misunderstood this, but I think my expectation is that they act as an observer as opposed to necessarily a full participant, but that doesn't mean to say that up to the protocols that the chair would set, I suppose, is to but yes, we need to be mindful of that. But
we participate in board discussions, is what it says.
presumably, though, the department goes through some process of clearing people and.
Yeah, we understand they are running an application process for candidates. Different public sector boards are applying. They run through that process, do some kind of interview process, but then align people to boards based on the best fits. That's what they're saying.
Thank you.
But noted about the concerns.
All right, John, good to see you. Yeah.
Thank you, sorry, people.
Yes, Nick.
One other point on the chief executive's report deals with health and safety matters in secondary, but as I think I've done as health and safety champion, and we considered whether we need more signage on Blue Lake in terms of the infiltrations into Henry Cameron's.
Well, Gerard's responsible for asset management works that we have regular review. So
the lake you're referring to that we don't own is accessible to the public. The lake we own has got a big fence around and we are strictly controlling access to that. There are lots of warning signs. Security is on hand all the time to make sure people aren't trespassing, and we deal with any trespass incidents.
Thank you.
So access is very restricted.
All right, thank you for that. Daniel, did you want to come in there? Sorry, no. Just reaching for coffee there. So I think I just cover off a couple of little things on our participation in the apprenticeship pilot program. Value, I think the way I would envisage it is that it's good to have participation from the individual because that helps them to learn. But I would obviously take it for myself if I felt that I could assist them in fruitful participation and involvement in the program. I'll just do that kind of offline if that makes sense. I think it's good, when you run these processes, I think just there aren't enough diverse applicants into the process. So I'm hopeful that by being a member of this, that we can help people to develop, to create the diversity that's important. So that's that. And then perhaps just to note on investment zones, absolutely we discussed and unanimously approved that in a part 2 discussion with the board. I think it's good to minute that our submission was unanimously supported by the board, and we're very excited about the opportunities that presents for the Development Corporation, Ebbsfleet Central East, and Estuary more widely. So we look forward to that progressing. Otherwise, are there any further comments? Your report is duly noted, then, Ian. Thank you very much indeed. So then, have a mid-year performance report.
Yeah, thank you. So as the paper in its usual form, thanks to James largely for compiling the information therein. The board will recall that we are in a slightly strange situation in that we have the board have agreed an interim business plan, and it's interim because we haven't had our full capital allocation yet. So there was a recognition regarding it as an interim that some things may have to change if that allocation is not forthcoming or is not as we had hoped or expected. That said, it's really important that we have, this is why the board agreed to put an interim in place, that we have a clear set of priorities and targets that the executive are heading towards. So just as a reminder there of the context, in terms of the actual progress against those priorities, the board will see in section 2, we note a number of highlights, including the submission of the outline planning application for the first phase of Ebbsfleet Central. The design forum has been relaunched and the first meetings have taken place. And there's been continued work to promote Ebbsfleet and build the community. The community board has continued to meet, and festivals have taken place over the summer. At 2.4, we list a number of things where we are behind or have likely, in fact, the full year to miss the expected milestone targets across a number of projects. The board will be aware from the previous discussions we've had around Blue Lake and Grove Road that our progress on those two projects has altered whilst we've taken a relook at the concepts and the options that we're exploring due to the assessment over the last 6 months of the value for money coming out of the potential schemes that we were pursuing. So that is going to be reflected in our end of year reports, and so it's obviously we're aware of that now, so we're reporting against that. Against the KPIs themselves, performance is, as you'll see, generally very strong in terms of the new homes. We are more than 50% of the annual target at this point in the year, and we have there is a strong pipeline of units that are started on site, which we would is the pipeline for the completions for the rest of the year. So there's still a strong pipeline out there. As we heard this morning from one of our major schemes, sales are still happening. Number of inquiries is down somewhat. I think we can probably expect that to be reflected, but certainly the developers this morning at Ashmere reflected the fact that people are still visiting, and those that do tend to be the ones that are serious and progressing. So so we're on track, slightly above trajectory for the house completions. Other sort of noticeable points include, I think, the opening of the Platinum Jubilee Park in Castle Hill, which happened, and that contributes quite significantly to the vision of open space and cycleways, walkways, and also the completion of the first custom-built homes in Ebbsfleet has been achieved at Alfredon. We are conscious, however, despite that success, that our overall corporate plan target to achieve greater diversification of product is still a challenge for us. So that's a start, but there's clearly more that is needed to be done to meet our overall aspirations in that respect. So I think I'll stop there, Simon, and just see whether there are any questions or comments about the performance.
Thank you very much for that, Ian. Board, any comments, observations? Yes,
Just on 2.4, you say the EDC has faced some challenges to recruit key roles due to the tight labour market that the UK as a whole is facing. I just wanted to ask, in relation to those roles, presumably we've advertised, and is it a question of too few applicants or too few applicants of the suitable applicants of the right standard? That's the first part of the issue I'd like to raise. And the second part is, how does that impact on retention of existing staff? And I'm really looking for some information or reassurance that we are doing whatever we need to retain our existing key staff.
So on the recruitment side, we've definitely seen a number of posts where there's been very few applicants. Those that we have had have fallen below the standard that we would expect to see, having met their criteria. So with a couple of posts, we haven't interviewed anybody. Low numbers in the first place, and nobody actually meeting the criteria. We've undergone a recent round of recruitment. A number of posts have been out, and we've had strong applications from internal candidates for a number of those roles. But again, the external number of candidates is relatively low. Or might remember that I've raised it before, and we've concluded that we need to raise our profile and promote the opportunities in the organisation, and the significance of the projects that we're involved with and the interest of that. We are therefore, the next set of roles that we go out with will be accompanied by what I believe will be a much improved communications effort around that to raise profile. We might well show you something a little bit later on in the agenda, which is part of helping to do that. Yeah, so it's insufficient applicants, and where we do get external applicants, particularly not having the required criteria. What does that mean in terms of retention? Well, I think I think the opportunity, as we have seen in this recent round, for internal candidates to apply for roles that are more senior, I think is a key factor. And if they meet the required standards, that is great, and it provides opportunities, because we are a small organisation. So the opportunities for promotion and development they're not huge overall, but actually when they come along, I think that is internal candidates do get those opportunities, and I think that's a big motivator for retention as well. We're obviously very conscious of the market is tight. There's lots of pressures around cost of living, and pay market has moved very rapidly over the last 6 to 9 months in terms of pay awards in the public and the private sector. So I think we can see more pressure around that on the horizon, and over the next sort of 6 or 9 months in terms of retention. So
want to prolong this, but is there more that we should be doing to ensure retention of a high quality staff?
Well, I think the motivation of the vast majority of our staff is about the environment here, the positive nature of the environment, the organisation, the task that we're involved with, the complexity, the interest, what that will do in terms of gaining their experience. So in terms of that, and as the overall package of holiday, other benefits, I think is very attractive. But I think I'm very conscious of one element of that is pay, and we're more constrained perhaps in our environment as to what we can do around that. But I think that will become a challenge over this 6 or 9 months.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Perhaps if there are no more comments, a couple of, oh yes, please Nick, after you. Yeah, totally.
So the performance report highlighted a couple of things. Maybe we'll be discussing Alfred and Bob later as to what the nature of the developer's review is. I've just asked for a brief comment on the Northfleet Embankment West primary substation issues and whether those existential / materially impactful and resolution, if not just
Apologies. I don't know whether Jenny, you got any knowledge about that, or that's a Julia issue.
The application was submitted, is invalid.
Okay,
So I was
that's
trying to
the
work
problem.
out why it's invalid.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't get any information on that.
Okay,
Okay.
so it's about an invalid plan application.
right, so not a money thing. And then my other it's a comment. The Blue Lake and Grove Road area solutions.
Yeah.
Do you think that the solutions are going to come from internal value engineering thought processes as to what the likely commercial solutions should be, or you'd be able to resist going out to the market for yet another set of enormous fees to resolve the position, bearing in mind how talented the internal team.
Did you say that was a comment that you were making, or was that?
I think that's a comment.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question in there at all. But I would just, I mean, I think we should be, particularly on Grove Road, we should be able to internalise the thought process of what is the right solution when we solve, go out for really quite focused external professional rather than please give us your ideas and what you think we might do. That would be part of us maturing.
Then do you want to provide another comment to Nick's comment?
I can comment that we are doing exactly as you are suggesting, and at the moment both projects are very much being driven by the internal team using all their skills and knowledge they've developed on those projects in the short term. We will invariably need some support when it comes to taking forward those sort of preferred ideas and design, etc. But yeah, we're trying to very much use those skills. We'll only spend money very discreetly when required.
Absolutely the answer of my comment.
All right, thank you for that, Nick. Yes, Valerie.
I absolutely understand the issues around the development cycle and the like, but it kind of unnerved me a little bit that under KPI 5 and 10, there won't be any commercial community floor space reported, or indeed investment in social and community infrastructure. And I think that needs presenting well,
Yes.
since we are delivering on the city and promoting mixed and balanced sustainable communities, all the rest of it. So it will certainly need more than a note, I would suggest, just in the annual.
And yes, I think we're very conscious of that perspective. It is about the cycle, and in previous years we have had targets and been set. But in this year, there isn't anything material to set a target. So there's but you're right. There's a story around that, which is not the cyclical nature, but the way that those facilities come forward, which was probably told in the business plan when we put the paper to the board originally. But yes, I agree entirely. There's a messaging element.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, Valerie. Perhaps a couple of observations. Come to Nick's comment. I think, look, there's been solid performance for the first 6 months of the Development Corporation. Two areas which in the grid highlighted red, which we referenced, both around Blue Lake restoration and Grove Road. Those are very important course correction initiatives which are undertaking, as we said, by internal analysis of what's going to present the optimised outcome, both for Garden City, residents of the Garden City, but importantly the taxpayer. So, those would be, if there's any such thing as a good red, those would be good reds in my mind, that we're embarked on the right decision process to get a better outcome for the taxpayer and our mission. So that's great. Ian, the point around which we discussed around hiring, I think we did mention that in specific roles, if we felt that value could be added through employing kind of expert headhunter search agents in particular roles, that's something we give thought to improve the the bench of people who apply for it. So I think we have experienced this a couple of times. So I think there could be some key roles where you might consider that adding some real value there. So I think that's it. So I think solid performance, in choppy waters, as they say. So well done to the whole team at the mid-year point. Hopefully we'll carry it on to the end of the full year. That's on noting. Thank you. That then brings us on to our next paper, the communications update. Caroline.
Just a quick whistle-stop talk from me for this month. We took on board the comments made with relation to removing the brand narrative, particularly around the feasibility of adding any further logos or branding use. It was really useful for us to actually explore sort of where we were at in terms of current staff implementation and knowledge of the brand as is. So at this moment in time, we felt that any kind of variations to the logo use in the brand would be too lengthy and not really bring that much value to the exercise. So we retained the rest of the feedback, chose to remove the live, work, play graphic and implemented and rolled out the brand narrative and pack at the last Star Away Day. Our focus at the moment is just making sure that we have that unity for the current resource as is, and we'll review in future if we need to implement any additional resourcing. That was, for all intents and purposes, picked up and received really well by the staff. So it's just about supporting them to actually implement that proactively and correctly moving forward. As has just been discussed with regards to recruitment, we have just finished working with a design agency to create a recruitment video for the next phase of roles that will be before the end of the year. That's incorrect. So this video will accompany a recruitment strategy that will essentially do a deep dive into what our current positioning is, and do all the prep work to make sure that we are providing our audiences with as much exposure to roles as possible. So we have a 1.5-minute video tailored to standard list of time to kind of reach many different roles and audiences that we cover within recruitment, but it's also accompanied by shorter clips specifically made for social media that are tailored specifically towards different elements of culture with working here, different elements of the kind of technical roles that you can expect to work on,
So really that's just to add another element and another layer to maybe, you know, what's been missing previously in past recruitment drives. So I'll hopefully be showing that to you in between part 1 and 2, so as not to disrupt the tech that is going on here. So we can all have a look at that after this. We observed the period of national mourning across socials, and then after this we've had some football engagement opportunities across digital and traditional press. We've discussed investment zones. We had the ministerial visit that was well documented across social media, and then off of the back of that we had interest from the Sunday Times, who came to visit us to discuss all things East and investment zones. That was a really positive visit, championed by Mark and Jen.
The face of the Garden City, I would say.
Yeah, so I can't look Jen in the eye, so I'm going to in trouble for that. There'll be a photographer there. But we did a walk around that replicated the ministerial visit. It was really well received by the journalists, and it's just another asset and achievement that we have to kind of add to raising our exposure overall. So that featured in the 9th of the Sunday Times business section. So looking forward, we're starting to plan for the year ahead. So next month I'll be bringing to board a calendar 2023 overview and strategy to how we can continue to increase engagement, work collaboratively with community to help build that content and strategic planning, alongside a skeletal plan of how we're going to implement some digital assets for our resources. So offering kind of newsletter distribution alongside the traditional methods of getting our Ebbsfleet living and marketing messaging out there. That will take a piece of work to ensure that we're compliant with all things GDPR and security monitoring. So that will definitely be a work in progress, but I'm looking to implement spring 2023. There's a number of projects that we've been working on with other members of the team. I think they're being covered in other sections. So that's really it from me.
Thank you, Caroline. Just say before I bring the board in, I think we've really upped our performance in this area. So thank you for all your hard work on this. So any thoughts, observations, board? Yes, of course, Nick.
Yes, I mean, it's good news about the Sunday Times business editor came down courtesy of the minister, or happenstance. Did the department organise that, or generally was it?
No, I think it was very much off of the back of investment zones being widely spoken about. The department didn't organise it. I will take all of the credit that I can get. So it was very much a standalone project for EBC. They were tentatively looking at getting another journalist to do like a north-south divide, but we took all the space for that. So you know, it was a good focus for EDC as a standalone without any kind of departmental.
It was working to versus Ebbsfleet, wasn't it? So I thought the Bellway article was really good one. I thought. And I'm sort of interested in the process about how the website stays, the Twitter, the Facebook, the Instagram are going, and what our target market was, and what you think the trends are. Particularly on some of the social media, the trends sort of seem to be a bit down this week, which I saw this month, which I thought was quite surprising, bearing in mind we had sort of the investment announcement, we had the minister visit, we had the permanent secretary, and we had the Ebbsfleet central application. I'm interested in your thought process about who we're aiming for, what's doing best in the context of Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Back to the website advertising itself, what your sort of trend short term.
Yeah, so I think we were slightly skewed this period because the period of completely radio silent, that's to be expected. The more we post and the more that we run those reports, it's quite clear to see kind of which resource kind of picks up the most attention. I think Facebook, it certainly performs best when it's tailored to community placemaking, keeping residents up to date. We've got about just shy of 10 community kind of sub pages and groups that we're able to tap into. The community are more than welcome to Ebbsfleet having a presence in those. I think we discussed that at previous boards, for us to tap into those audiences and make sure that we have that participation and voice. Twitter is slightly more difficult. It has a mix of demographic audiences. We cater to both residents, local communities and professionals on Twitter. So typically our best performing posts are the ones that have accompanying media, or kind of a variety of digital assets to accompany them. So the ones that tend to perform well are the ones with images, or where we kind of hit those hashtags to get us as much exposure as possible. I think the general trend that I've seen since I've arrived is certainly we've grown our LinkedIn presence quite consistently, and I think consistency is one of the things to take away from this, where we've been regularly posting. We've had some really key projects that we've been able to achieve with. Those are quick wins, but kind of as we continue to make those posts, Twitter and Facebook tend to lean towards the placemaking side of things.
I got one other supplementary point, which goes with the brand. I mean, I was travelling on the bus today. Bellway were proudly advertising their site that they're selling, the local one they're digging, and was Ebbsfleet Garden City, which sort of resonated well. And this is a sort of parallel question to Mark, because I've just agreed to spend £30,000 of the GLA on behalf of one of my clients for wayfinding contributions, as to whether actually we should be using sort of the planning process to make sure that, you know, a lot of our wayfinding branding issues is delivered by our partners. And this is a very legitimate Section 106 expense, it seems to me, for developers to be contributing material to wayfinding, which, if we have a very good set of branding criteria, roll out our sort of branding process that much faster. That's all.
Yes, like to say, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely a legitimate thing that we can be looking to secure. Obviously, there's a lot of Section 106s already in place. The Bellway scheme you may have been past possibly was Croxton and Gary, which is in the Dartford area. They then have SIL, so we then secured contributions in a slightly different way because of the SIL issue. So yeah, obviously on the different sites, we're sort of securing things in different ways. There is wayfinding strategy document that obviously the other board have seen previously, and there's that sort of dual sort of role to try to encourage the developers to be implementing things on site. So across the section of Eastern Green, it's around on-site delivery, and then there's some other areas. We are, for example, holding some money for Ebbsfleet Green around off-site signage, and then we need to identify projects that we work at. So, but other future applications come on forward.
Sorry, just to jump on wayfinding as well. I had a meeting with Julia. I'm sure she'll update you when she's back. We have already had discussions and kind of initial concept meetings as to how we can implement our brand into wayfinding. So those conversations and those kind of initial thoughts have been provided to accompany the plan that Mark just mentioned.
Thank you. John, I think you wanted to come in.
Yes, please. What I'm going to say, I know it won't be popular, but you know what I'm like, I'll still say it. I still have this feeling that we're very insular in what we're doing. We're not reaching out to the wider community of the existing community. We are talking to the new residents of the EDC in the Facebook sites you're onto. You're linked into those, which is great, but we're not linking out to the wider community and ingraining the new and the old together. And that is creating resentment. And funny enough, I was looking at Facebook. I'm not a great fan of all this Twitter. I don't do Twitter. I actually have Facebook to watch it because I don't do it. It's safer not to do it. But I saw an article flagged today from somebody quite prominent locally attacking the EDC for Ebbsfleet Central. That the scheme was trying to hide access to the area to understand how great the landscaping was, the countryside was, the planting was. and we're trying to build onto it. Well, to me, that's a message issue where we've actually lost control of the debate. This is originally always has been down to development. We're not hiding anything from anybody. But if that builds a head of steam amongst existing community, then you're creating a problem with your planning application. And it's interesting who's done that and why he's done it. And because there becomes an issue there. There are, unless we broaden our communication more to existing communities, and to be frank, a lot of people I know they're not on LinkedIn. I keep being asked to be on LinkedIn. I've got an account, and last time I went into it was about 10 years ago. I don't do LinkedIn. I don't need to. So the fact that a lot of people are doing LinkedIn are from the existing new community, not the existing. So we're almost we're congratulating ourselves on communication with the wrong people. The people coming in want to be here, they found it, that's why they've come. But we're going to also integrate the two, because when the EDC does stop and disappear, you're handing it back to Dartford Migration. And at the moment, what you're doing is handing back a problem. And you can't do that. That's not a legacy you want to hand back.
So I think valid points, there's a lot of work to be done, and I think it would be lazy, like you say, to practice ourselves for the quick win and sort of insight, say, within Ebbsfleet. It's a work in progress. It's not something that will happen overnight. Growing those communications further than our red line boundary, certainly that's not an overnight fix or win, but within every kind of seasonal Ebbsfleet Living newsletter that we do, we're looking to broaden reach outside of the Ebbsfleet area. Adding that digital resource and the newsletter subscription offerings will again be another opportunity for people to keep up to date with what's going on in the area, even if they don't live in the area. I've also been in touch and working quite closely with kind of comms equivalents of me in West Dartford to provide those regular updates, tap into local community resources, and again see where those opportunities are. Work outside just the Ebbsfleet community groups. So I hear you. The understanding is there. It's not a quick win. You're absolutely right. We should be congratulating ourselves just working within this area, but it's something that will take place. And even just monitoring and being able to respond to that appetite or the feedback that local community groups or people tweet about Ebbsfleet Central, it's a mammoth task. So we're always trying to keep our finger on the pulse and do as much as we can, acknowledging that there is still room.
Who's speaking to immigration comms?
Andy. So he had a briefing sheet for me yesterday afternoon, just with an update. Stop for what we've been up to, and to kind of, I've asked him to do a dig around of if there's any opportunities that we haven't reached with Ebbsfleet Central to see if he's got any insight into kind of what the problems are, if there's more people that we can be reaching. So again, just having that regular communication, those regular updates with him will make sure that it's not just me convincing myself that I've reached all areas, and that's all that we need to do.
Can I just add to that? So, I mean, John, you made the point in connection with, I haven't seen the post that you're referring to on Facebook Ebbsfleet Central, but when we consulted pre the submission of the application, we held a number of events. And I know for a fact, as I went to a number of them, they were held in various locations, only some of which were within our red line boundary. We went to 2 other locations in existing surrounding communities. So I think certainly that in that respect we've attempted to reach out and to communicate with existing surrounding communities as well as the new residents, and we'll continue to do so. So, but yeah, I haven't seen the particular post, but
right. Valerie, okay. Valerie.
Thank you. A couple of suggestions. In my local community, surprisingly, because it sounds old-fashioned, but actually a lot of people read the local newspaper, and there may be a Gravesham Recorder or having we could certainly publicise there. But also there are community magazines and a lot of neighbourhood groups. you can go on a neighbourhood group to sell your sofa, but equally to promote the new housing development at Ebbsfleet. And they are the sorts of things that the local communities will engage with very, very regularly. So I think we should flip to a different, well, we're not flip to it, sorry, but have that sort of duality of interests, so sort of a county-wide and national clearly, but also very local.
Absolutely. So we invested in creating a software bank that splits the national and the local news to make sure that we're not missing those audiences. And again, we've been growing the Facebook groups that we're able to reach, the conversations that we're able to participate in. I spent a lot of time just searching Ebbsfleet, Dartford, Gravesham, across social media to see if there's anything that pops up that we can join in. It is just quite a large task, I'm sure you can imagine. There's a lot of small organic community groups that have really meaningful conversations, but we are a small team. Comms is a one-man band, so it's just a case of slow and steady, but not too slow, wins the race of being able to expand that reach to as many people as possible.
And sending letters into the letters page is actually a good win, both at local and national.
Thank you.
Okay, just to finish this off, I've had a lot of experience of this. My general view is that sort of Twitter isn't particularly good at spreading a message to your community. It is good reaching certain kind of influencers, decision makers. So that's a good medium for that. LinkedIn is very good. There's much more reach I find in LinkedIn than Twitter. In that regard, if you're reaching your decision makers and influencers and people involved generally, regeneration, etc., to spread that big message. You'll always get a lot of take up on Facebook for community driven activities, far more than we may be up to here. Now, I don't know if we've considered boosting some of our Facebook social media to the general area. You can obviously set a radius around this. I found that very useful to get your message out, to use an political expression there. Also big Facebook groups. I know back in Maidenhead, huge amount of regeneration going on there. You look, there's a set up by the community, but there's a group called Maidenhead Future, which has got the best part of 4,000 local residents in it, and they're picking about all the issues associated with wholesale redevelopment. And it's much better to have kind of advocates for your position in there than necessarily spread the word yourself. So can probably do more on Facebook. I think there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, we use paid socials, did Future Festival to spread it past Ebbsfleet, but yeah, certainly.
And the coverage, particularly on Kevin's paper, has always seemed to be very good in terms of local external Ebbsfleet coverage. So there's a deficit in that.
Yeah.
Just a question as to how maybe it's a combination of what Kevin is doing to actually make what we're doing relevant to people who are outside Ebbsfleet. On as to how we can make what with the community events that we're doing in Ebbsfleet relevant to people who live in Northwood and make them feel welcome.
Yeah, and I'm sure as and when information is in the public domain discussed around Ebbsfleet Central East and whatever, using some of our social media channels in order to get the message out, the benefits to the wider community, I think would be. You're always going to have people who have got negative slant, of course, but get information in front of people that's easily digestible and readable for them. Okay. Good, thank you for that, everyone. Great work. So that's duly for noting. Thank you. Right, then with Mark, your Director of Planning and Places report.
Thank you, Simon. Yes, the usual report from me. So yeah, noted in section 2, committee met last month to consider small applications High Street, so that was approved. There's a busy being planned later, so 2 presentations developers. So Ashmere phase 3, so the third phase of the scheme, the board went to see earlier, and the second phase from Redrow at Alcombe South. And then the main meeting, there's an application over at Manor Way on the industrial estate there, continuation and use there, and then balcony and terrace design guys going back to the committee for final consideration. There's a couple of items that are just listed in 2.6. The phase 2 at Harbour Village, which should be on track for the committee in November, and then potentially application and presentation of the east side as well. In section 3, a couple of titles already been mentioned. Ebbsfleet Central was obviously submitted this month. A couple of other things to identify. We've had a change of use application, which has just recently been made valid for car park C, so for the temporary use of other car parks with the station by Tesla for a sort of a test drive area. So that will be consulted on very shortly. And later on this month, we're expecting the application for Western Homes. That's quite a lot of units. It's over 400 homes, 412 springs to mind, and a collection of sort of shops and non-residential units over the market centre in Alcombe. So that will be a long fast track to the south of the secondary school there. So that's going to be quite a significant scheme coming in. 4.2, I just mentioned a little bit about the Dartford local plan. So yeah, just to give the board some sort of comfort, I suppose, that we are involved in that process. Ruth, working with Jen, is also involved from the landowner side. So from the LPA side, we're just working out with Dartford at the moment whether we are sort of representing ourselves or sort of working with them to be able to sort of go through sort of the schemes around, particularly around housing delivery. The design forum reports, so I mentioned 4.3 design forum. Those reports have actually been received today, so we're going to have a quick look through those because those are in relation to the two schemes that the committee will look at later. Housing, has obviously been captured in the mid-year report. We sort of caught up, I suppose, did a bit of a manual count in the end, and pretty much 50% at 50% a year, so that's pretty good. But that isn't that is probably a conservative number on the basis that because that was a manual count, that was around one of my team sort of being able to sort of have some confidence that things would be completed. And the exercise at 5.3 was just to give hopefully to give some comfort around what we expect to be coming forward for the second half of the year. So those are the units that are underway that we expect to be completed by the end of March. Should give some comfort about the business plan number. On the dashboard, the started and not completed number is very high. I think it's about 900 and something. I'm going to do a health check on that for the next time because it does seem quite high. I was thinking the other day, where are they? And I can easily get to a relatively high number just thinking about it in my head. But I will just do a double check on that before next time. Obviously, you spoke to Countryside this morning, just a little bit about the information that we've received from the market in the last few days. So we've had there's some stock units from Keepmoat down at Cable Wharf, so some 4-bedroom detached units that I think are sort of available that haven't been selling. And we've also had some news from one of the developers at East Quarry where their affordable housing part pulled out as well because there was some concerns there. So we just need to do a little bit more engagement, I think, with them just to understand some things around the market. I think we've got our developers meeting in a couple of weeks' time, so we'll obviously cover that. And section 6 was the update in terms of sort of split housing type and tenure. I think I said that I bring this back every 6 months, and apologies when I went through it, it's practically a year ago now. But the general proportion with those percentages hasn't massively changed, obviously. So 5,517 is what we take as today. So hopefully that gives a good sort of picture in terms of products and typologies, but that is really capturing the market homes and the affordable homes. It doesn't obviously dive into the sort of specialist that June flagged up yourself, which we still need to do a bit of happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Board, any questions? Yes, Neil.
I noticed on Cable Wharf that the developer is coming back and saying, the page 34, I think, discussion re external materials for riverfront blocks, concerns raised by developer due to rising construction costs, requiring reduction in material quality. And it's just a general observation from me that we ought, I think, to be careful to resist changes in material quality once we've approved. And I suspect because of increasing costs, we might come under pressure on this front. But if they require approval, it seems to me if we were justified in requiring that quality at the time of approval, it would have to be something pretty compelling to justify a change. Obviously, one has to consider each application on its merits, but I thought that a red flag ought to be raised over that.
It's a really helpful steer, because I think that we're getting that question on an awful lot of sites.
Could I make an alternative steer? I hesitate to trespass on the province committee I no longer sit on. I can quote Goethe here, about how the artist shows his skills in limitation. The fact of the matter is that we can sit here baying for the original materials if we want to. If they're unaffordable, we have to face a degree of reality. So what I think planners should be focused on, where they have a purchase for this, and won't always have a purchase. What I think should be focused on is trying to ensure that any alternative materials used are of high quality in their own terms, and not simply a dumbed down version of, or a cheapened version of what was originally envisaged. So if I can explain what I mean, is that you can do really wonderful things with cheaper materials, if that's what you have to do. It isn't just a question of what is the most expensive material, the one we've specified, and forcing people to stick with that. If they can come up with a genuinely attractive alternative that is cheaper, we should be encouraging that, because the alternative is we hold out for a certain standard quality of brick and we end up accepting just cheap old brick because we can't hold the line. And I think I think we should be actively engaging with the idea that there might be other materials, if they can be done really well, that's what we should be looking at.
Yes, but the concern here is a reduction in material quality.
Yes, that's
and
right.
That is what I'm concerned about. If somebody comes back and says this particular material is not available, or the price has gone whizzing up, if they come back with something of equivalent quality, fine, not if it's used in order to reduce quality, because we're going to lose the quality that we're seeking to achieve in the Garden City.
Well, it may be that we are actually saying the same thing, which is always a happy position here.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with all of that. I think that there are definitely examples whereby we are being asked to change materials, but we're quite comfortable with the change because it does maintain the level. In some areas, we are concerned about the change. What the team do is they focus in on the quality of the output, rather than necessarily taking the price as a starting point, because they need to be understanding what that sort of final position is going to be. The two areas there, for example, are in relation to some balcony details, which obviously the committee have been quite interested in recently, and then there's also another issue which we feel is quite intrinsic to the whole sort of fundamental sort of feel of the building, which is why we've been quite concerned about those particular points. But yeah, we are getting these requests from developers, and it's trying to sort of go on that balance by encouraging the development and supporting where we can, but not obviously allowing reduction costs.
Yes, Fred.
Just to add, sorry, it might be difficult to hear me. I'm very like sort of in Neil's camp on this, having had sort of developers through the years plead poverty more times than I can remember. I am extremely sceptical about unaffordability arguments. Clearly, we need to take each one on its merits. But the fact that materials have gone up in price does not make a scheme in and of itself unaffordable. It may mean that there is less profit for the developer, but that is a wholly different thing.
Thank you for that, Fred, and you're coming through loud and clear, just so you know. All right, John.
Yeah, the first observation I've made, 'cause I'm pleased I'm not on the planning committee. I'm delighted actually from the debate going so far. What I would ask is, obviously it's a very good report, but just an update, you really, there's a number of schemes coming through in Gratian, which I think will have a definite effect on the EDC area. And it's a request really is for the board to work with Gratian and those developers to actually understand how all of it can come together. To my mind, for example, the scheme I'm thinking particularly about is Northie Harbourside. A new 8,000 seater football stadium, retail offices, 3,500 flats. So where we're talking about 450 units, that's 3,500. And it's right by the harbour. So it's adjacent to Grove Road and Northfleet, east and west developments. So to my mind, and obviously Northfleet Central coming the other way, it all potentially should come together, and you shouldn't be able to see the gap between them. But to achieve that, I think we need to make sure that you work together, and we collectively all want that to happen. I hope it will. I know that scheme was specifically redlined only to be in Gratian, to avoid the EDC and to avoid Dartford. But it's a big scheme.
Yeah, and I think obviously, I probably don't pick up consultations that we do with the councils too much in these, but we did comment when the Gratian consulted us on scope of the opinions, the environmental statement, and when we get consulted on the planning application, I'm to pick that up with this report. We haven't had that yet. But obviously, so myself and Jen have had meetings with them through conversation.
I did see your observations, so in turn I get to see all the observations.
Okay.
So I've seen them.
On that point, thank you very much for that, John. Perhaps you could include where we're, being consulted, where we're a statutory consultee,
Yeah.
On major developments in the area.
Yeah, quite small scale things.
No.
Yeah,
I think Northfleet, Harbourside, certainly there could be others, but, John will be able to tell you, but it would be good for the board to understand the conversations we're having there. Thank you, John. Nick?
Yes, following on the previous conversation, agreeing with Fred and adopting a poacher turned innkeeper attitude. It's rare that certain, with certain aspects of finishes going to make a material difference. Particularly when those finishes were what actually convinced you to go on planning consent in the first place because of the quality of the scheme. And it's quite a difficult thing for you as a planning authority to concede a material change of finishes when you're not seeing the entire capital stack and making decisions between is 19% unacceptable return on cost as opposed to 25%, and similar what else has moved up where in the stack in particular with regards to house prices since the consent was given. That being said, just got an alert this morning that Gardner and Theobald have said that structural cost this quarter was 5.5%. This quarter is stunning. It's belie the sort of everything's going to calm down.
Yeah, I think looking at the individual items, in isolation does mean you probably get a different picture, and maybe been talking about that yesterday. So totally understood about looking at it to be the round, but we'll confident lines.
When I slightly got the floor, can I just make a couple of comments? I mean, thank you for the housing mix numbers. That was really useful. Yes, it has been here. And and also useful to see that the affordable delivery numbers as well. But it's really pleasing that what a large percentage of family homes we have delivered. We are delivering a community. The dashboard is a super useful document. Thanks. I know it looks simple, but it's made.
Yes, it does.
And then I think my final point, two final points. One is, yes, the balconies is just so important. Look and feel of the entire place as to the quality of
balconies and such pressure to dumb down balconies about. We have to be super careful. And then finally, and this is probably not a planning comment, sorry, not a planning comment per se, but as health and safety champion, do we have a sort of finalised view across the completed sort of 5,600 units about the fact that all cladding issues have been resolved or are being resolved?
Yeah,
Because as a planning authority, we must have some form.
well, we sign off obviously when cladding is used, and then it's then formally agreed through the business
Historic.
process. So when the issues of first came up through the Grenfell, we did a review at that time. I think the only cladding that had been used was possibly the stuff over at Marston's. And I remember specifically looked into that with the building control inspector sort of sign off process, and they confirmed that was okay. So yeah, I think we're okay.
Can I just
Yes, of course,
say,
yeah.
as the self-appointed balcony champion,
I'll get you a badge.
we are, the planning committee, having had a presentation already on the balcony design guide. And it's going to be before us this evening for approval. And I think we were told that we're one of the first authorities to have a guide like that. So I hope that we can use it for setting principles so that we can apply the principles rather than an ad hoc approach to each application.
Well,
So we're on it.
that'd be really good. We've got some development in Suffolk and the mid-Suffolk Suffolk vernacular design guides for new build is a fascinating and really carefully collated document, and gave everybody what was acceptable in terms of eaves and balconies and similar to maintain the Suffolk vernacular thought process. And we're creating Garden City, which should be very strong.
All right, Valerie, yes.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Nick. Actually, the balcony design can just pleasing, so thank you for the work on that. But when you down into the figures, it's great to see that mix, lots of family housing and 30% affordable, but actually when you do drill down, only 7.5% is affordable rent, which kind of plays back into John's earlier comments. So do we have a standard for that as a percentage, or do we just take that overarching 30% affordable?
With new applications, there is then a split in the local plans around this, I think it's station area, John may know, around the split between rented versus shared ownership. The reason why there's such a big swing towards shared ownership, so Eastern Quarry, actually 25% rented on site, 20% shared ownership, and 5% is affordable. So yeah, it's something I'm discussing with Kevin recently around trying to look through some of things some product sizes. There's an awful lot of two-bedroom shared ownership coming through, for example, whether we need to engage with the councils more to understand who's on their registers, so we can then link that back to the leading here. But yeah, new applications coming through, for example, still 35%, I think, is basically the application about it, and it's split between shared ownership.
I think it's really important because in terms of legacy and that sort of wider integration, you know, if, for example, the children of the existing community just outside the red line, so to speak, could have access to affordable rentals within that red line, it would be really, really helpful. CDC ceases to exist.
Yeah, of course, some of the housing is allocated by the councils.
No, I understand that, of course.
So to see that they would have access to that.
I think standards of integration are different to Dartford.
Yeah.
I think it's not the question of politics, but because it's united amongst all the parties in Gratian, our views are we need more affordable rented than Dartford do.
Exactly, that's what I'm advocating, actually, given we've got this opportunity there.
We're pushing more towards social and affordable rented, and even then we're looking at what is the definition of affordable. So what might be affordable to everyone in this room isn't affordable to a lot of people I know in Gratian. they couldn't pay those rents. I think that becomes a difference.
Yeah, we have had some inquiries obviously about first homes. Coach John may have mentioned that was we have some first homes coming up in Ashton here, and there's been some interest on some other sites as well. So that's obviously costs of the full product, but I appreciate there's some areas depending on how that's defined in. So yeah, I think we just need to do some work on diversification generally and with certainly.
But we are guided by the policies of the local authorities, not our own policy as to the mix.
Yeah, in terms of the minimum that we have to provide for the applications.
Yeah, so the two local authorities are determining what that mix should be.
They're determining the split. I suppose we then consult them in terms of, for example, incubation flats versus four houses. I think that the challenge is that there's so much demand that sometimes developers come forward with an apartment, but and the councils do sometimes struggle to say no because there's just demand everywhere, and that's probably why there's been such demand.
So, but let us say when it comes to Ebbsfleet Central East, then that is Gratian and Dartford. What's the mix? You know, what percentage is Gratian? What percentage is Dartford there within Ebbsfleet Central
It's
East?
quite substantially weighted into Dartford. It's probably 3/4 Dartford and 1/4 Gratian roughly across the site.
Okay, so there'll be within that development, there'll be two very specific, probably different mixes of affordable housing and the elements which relate to.
Yeah, we need to work out how to write one consent with different rules and different patches. That's the challenge for another day. Let's to do that.
Without getting too much into it, my guess is that you're going to be in an environment, no help to buy, with shared ownership, which is going to be a very attractive product because the rental element is 2.75% indexed relative to where mortgage rates are going to be. So it's going to be a super attractive product coming from one LA, but then, you know, so potentially a greater mix of, you know, as you say, affordable rents, you know, social, truly affordable.
But we have to secure first homes as part of the application.
Yeah. Where are we on first homes? Is that because that was an NPPN suggestion that was going to be 35% of the total?
It's
25.
Yes.
Okay.
That has come in now, so we have to secure that.
Okay.
But as the decision-making authority, we're, as you say, we're guided by the policies in the plan. I just looked at them again. So Gravesham, you've got 70% affordable rent, 30% intermediate. Dartford in the current, it's got an emerging plan, 80% intermediate and 20% social rent. So
When we say that Ebbsfleet Central East, you said is what, 3/4 Dartford?
Approximately.
Overlaying all of that, you've got first homes at 25%.
Yeah, yes, yeah. So it's quite a patchwork.
So I think the important point here, there is only so much we can do, which is very different in terms of determining the mix of tenures of affordable housing in something of the scale, let's say, of Ebbsfleet Central East, because we are really driven by the policies of the two local authorities. It's important to get that, have a clear understanding of that. But John, you want to
I think the other issue I know my plans have picked up on is another planning issue is between Dartford and Gratian. Dartford have a seal. We use 106. You haven't got a seal. So just work out how much money is going to take from the developer on the seal. We may get an imbalance of the money towards Dartford. And to be open about it, Northleaf Central is effectively affecting people in Gratian and Northleaf. It doesn't really affect the people in Dartford. It affects some people in Castle Hill. If you actually look at the big buildings and the road network and everything else, predominantly affects the people in Northleaf. And yeah, I accept the majority of it, technically on land mass area, is in Dartford. It's just right on their edge. Same way we've got a recycling centre right on the edge of Dartford integration. Maybe thinks it's in Gratian, it's not. It's actually in Dartford. So we've got rubbish bin as well. And I think that's the problem, that how you manage the 106 that we will be expecting to make sure that, for example, here in Gratian, we're making sure that we hold that money. We don't just give it to Ken. Because what we found with Ken is the money that has in the past been collected in Gratian hasn't actually always been spent in ration. And I'm not prepared to accept that anymore. So if it's caused, if it needs to be raised under the planning rules to offset a problem of the development in the area, that money should be spent in the area. And I'm aware some of the money's been spent down, for example, ours in Dover. And that you've got to really stretch your imagination to see how that one works. So I want to make sure that really going forward, you take on board that there is a difference, and we want the money that can be allocated, should be allocated to Gresham area into that area.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on this already. It's going to be quite complicated to go through conditions, Seaside's 116, and then it's a silk component. So you're definitely aware. I will be looking at this as we move through the process. So that's okay.
Great, thanks, John. Just to stress again, when it comes to determining the planning application of Ebbsfleet Central East, we need to be very, very clear with the community that we are not making the judgment call on the tenure mix of affordable housing. That is driven by the policies of the two local authorities.
As the planning committee members who've made the declaration, can I make absolutely plain we have not been talking about a specific application in this discussion. We've been talking about it in principle for different areas.
Just so let's minute that. All right, good. We've had a debate there. I quite like the balconies in Ashmere, but I'll just throw that in. All right, good. Thank you for all the work on that, Mark. Kevin, Ebbsfleet Living.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just pick a few highlights out of the paper and assume the rest has been read. Probably the most exciting thing at Ebbsfleet in the last month was the opening of our first coffee shop, which actually was one of the number one things that people really said they wanted for quite a long time. So that was incredibly encouraging, and most of our staff have been making use of it as well. Particularly encouraging by the new coffee shop is the willingness of the proprietor to make it a community asset, because obviously, as Valerie mentioned earlier, we're very restricted in community space locally currently. So a lot of new activities are being delivered in the coffee shop, including yoga and wine tasting and flooring and all sorts of things, which it's great that that proprietor is using it for those purposes. Of particular note, on Mondays, a number of the local churches, including Baptist Church, Salvation Army, and St. Peter and St. Paul's in Swanston, have an event that's been held at a cafe. And it's one of the few good examples of where the existing community is working with the new community and actually delivering in that space. So that was encouraging to see those people working together in that. On a more somber note, the community came together to kind of remember the Queen Elizabeth II upon her death. Again, although it was a somber occasion, it's quite encouraging that we have a community that feels so strong and so neighbourly that they actually had two events to commemorate that. So again, that was quite encouraging. Local children returned to school, and of note is the Springhead School had opened their new outdoor classroom, which was funded by EDC as part of our Health and New Time programme, and that's the third of the outdoor classrooms that are now complete, following Long Primary in Northfleet and Cherry Orchard School. So I think we'll see the school putting that to good use moving forward. Also of interest, our Better Points app, which you'll recall is the app which rewards becoming active in Ebbsfleet and walking and cycling, which again is part of the Youth Fund programme. They have a particular initiative at the minute called Stop to Save, where they're encouraging people to dump their cars for short journeys and walk and cycle, and they're getting sort of double rewards for doing that. And again, particularly encouraging is that for every point or equivalent amount of money raised, that will be matched with contributions to the Hive Hope food bank in Northfleet. And again, the over 2,000 users of that app can actually have been encouraged to donate some of their points or their rewards to the food bank, as well as other local charities over the forthcoming months. In particular, this month, there's a lot in the forward look, which is promising a very active autumn/winter. And just really to pull out from that, the public meeting, which we're planning on the 2nd of December, that's come from a recommendation from the community board. We want to share their experience really helping shape events in the local area. And we're trying to encourage more residents from more areas to get involved. So again, we'll be looking, and actually Caroline and I have been talking today just about how we get to the wider community and make sure to include everyone. And that'll include things from leaflet drops, social media, and also probably having a bus from all the local areas to get them to the venue to make sure everybody can be included in that. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Kevin. Any comments? As always, very busy schedule there that's going on. Any comments, board?
No, I was enjoying the report. Really coming together in really success. And the school work was really good, I thought, from outdoor classroom. And the community in the Queen passing. Did we organise that, or did the community?
That was the community organising it themselves, which again is particularly encouraging. Like you said, our last resident satisfaction survey, about 91% of people said they felt we had a strong community here. I think that's kind of reflected in events like that where they come ahead and done them themselves.
It was on selling weather, a beautiful day when we attended Platinum Park with the permanent secretary, and it did look marvellous. And its structure and topography, it actually creates quite an arena scenario. And I was thinking about who is managing that. Is it Henry Camland, or is it us? Is it going to come across to the trust? Are we thinking of holding events? Because actually open air cinema and various other, it's just such a natural space.
So it's currently managed by RMG, the management company. However, they've been very willing to allow us and others to have events on that site, obviously through all the various procedures of getting licenses and health and safety reports. But we've used the village square space, which is a sort of natural amphitheatre as well, the fusion park. So we'll be looking at opportunities to use them moving forward if I were exploring the idea of using it for the World Cup and having a screen there.
Yeah, so it's quite Henman-ish.
Yeah. But yeah, it'd be very open to using the space.
All right, good. Thank you for all the work on Kevin. I think that's duly noted. That then brings us into the next paper, our skills and employment action plan update.
Do you want to stay there?
Yeah, Laura. Yes. Laura, are you going to be taking this one?
Yes.
Great. Excellent.
Like Kevin, I assume that everybody has read the paper on the update. This is the second of the updates on the Employment and Skills Action Plan. And I just really wanted to pull out a few highlights, really. One is around the education outreach programme that we have contracted Construction Youth Trust to deliver for us. So you'll recall that between January and March, they conducted a pilot in our local secondary schools for us, and then we contracted them again from April through to next March to continue the delivery of their two programmes. So far, they've gone into 10 of the different secondary schools in Dartford and Gravesham boroughs, had some really good engagement, delivered to over 900 students in those schools that they've approached as well. So they're by far exceeding their targets in terms of engagement. But the great thing is that they're really raising awareness of careers in the built environment across every age group and every level, in terms of, you know, everything from trades all the way up to degree apprenticeships and graduate programmes that might be available as well in the sector. The second thing to note is that as well as them doing the education outreach programme for us, I've been doing a lot of work as well, and so have some of the other staff within the EDC to support me, and we've been networking with more schools again, but also across various different platforms and networks such as the South East LEP, the North Kent Skills Group, the Careers and Enterprise Company. So on top of what the Construction Youth Trust have done, we're also making good positioning for the EDC in the sector as being, you know, the greatest voice in terms of built environment, careers, and the opportunities that brings. And then thirdly, board asked at the last update around baseline figures around local labour and apprenticeships in the Garden City. And developers have been very supportive in sending through their figures for the first 6-month period of this year, January to July. There's approximately 1,500 full-time employees in construction,
in the Garden City area. 23% are local to Dartford and Gravesham Borough, and there are 53 apprentices, which equates to 3.5% of the total workforce as well. So I'm going to be delivering those figures back to our developers tomorrow, because we're launching our social value ambitions to them, and then using our social value ambitions to push those numbers up, give more work experience, allow young people to get a greater understanding of what it's like to work within the sector, and really see if we can push those career talks up across all of the local schools as well. So it's been quite a positive 9 months.
Right, thank you very much for that. Board, comments, observations? Yes,
So
John.
just a question really. 23% are local to Dartford and Gravesham. Where did the other 75% come from?
Outside of the two boroughs, but I don't know. I've asked them to report specifically on Dartford and Gravesham Borough. They tend to work on a radius basis. So I was getting reports initially saying all our workers live within 40 miles, but that means nothing to us. So I just drilled it right down and said, right, so how many are residents of Dartford and Gravesham?
I think it'd be useful to know where the others are coming. That's a big percentage. Because Dartford and Gravesham is a big area, and so it managed to avoid living in any of it. 75% of the take up is quite. You've got to really go some to come from outside those areas to get that training. That's 75%. It'd be interesting to see where they're coming from. Was it London, other parts of Medway, other parts of Kent?
I will push very hard to try and get those figures, but you know they're reluctant to give them to me from a GDPR point of view, to be honest. But yeah, I'll go back to them and see what they can provide in terms of
We're just
where
getting
else they're coming from.
Don't have to give a home address.
Oh yeah, they just give me post numbers.
Well, I was surprised that the number was so low, bearing in mind the wide level of the geographic inference. That means that they are travelling significant distances to work in Ebbsfleet. It does seem very surprising. Whether that means that there is a level of overseas workers who are deemed non-domiciled. What is the definition? It's basically where they live.
Yeah, that's the postcodes.
They've got to live somewhere. Even if they come from overseas to work here.
Yeah.
Physically, they have to live somewhere. So it'd be interesting to know where that somewhere is. Really.
When you think that every day, 75% of the construction workforce in Ebbsfleet Garden City travels in, it is quite a thought.
It is my experience. It does seem low, but knowing how labour, particularly in the volume house builders, the subcontractors, they tend to move them from scheme to scheme, and most of the regional volume house builders operate across all of Kent. So if they don't, they will move them from a site down in East Kent to here as they get. So I've worked for house builders and you know as well, and I wasn't too surprised by that because I know how the workforce moves. So it would need if they particularly work for Taylor Wimpey, for example, then it would need Taylor Wimpey to always have something for a sufficient size in Gravesham, Dartford for those that labour to stay there. So
I think that's one of the issues we've been challenging the Lieutenant Coffee on, in that they say that people will live locally, fine. We're saying there is not the accommodation for them to live locally. So where are these people coming from? And if they're going by road, then we're creating a bigger problem we've already got. You're not bringing them all in by road. We're building the Lieutenant Crossing to reduce the road problems, not create more. Seems quite a personal way. But if they are living locally, where? And that's why we're saying that we want them to provide temporary accommodation for them. They're not taking up existing stock, because all they're doing is driving up the prices. They're driving up the rentals, they're driving up the affordable housing rates. And so local people themselves have been driven out with these temporary people coming in.
because the whole point about Darwin's work is to increase the capacity in the local area. People have the skills, the cards, trade to be able to take advantage of the opportunities here. So that's the
And the onus is only going to increase with Ebbsfleet Central.
Yeah.
So I thought the website interrupted before you put your hand up, but the thought process that actually the website can be a really big employment portal. Could be quite a major employment portal, to be really quite a integrating Ebbsfleet into the wider community.
Tomorrow, when I launch our social value ambitions, I'm also opening up a discussion around skills, local labour, training, whether there are any gaps in training, what can we do to support local people to upskill them and reskill them in the right skills that the developers are looking for as well, sort of bringing the circle to looping it all together. So I'll be able to report back on that as well.
Right, Valerie.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this paper, and there's a heck of a lot of work being done. Thank you. So a myriad of activities. And then I began to think about the impact and whether we were really confident in measuring, the outputs in this project. So, for example, if you've got a myriad of activities, how do I know that it's not double, treble, quadruple counting by the same individuals going from one participation project to another? And the more usual method of measuring success in terms of employment is not whether they've got a job, but whether they're still in employment 6 months afterwards, and so on. I also could see there's a lot of activity directly in schools, but of course, the young folk that are hardest to reach are those that are not in school, that have special needs and so on and so forth. So I don't know if it's possible to unpack that data so that we can really understand the true social values of them.
Yes, to address the young people who are not in education, who might be at alternative provision, the Infrastructure Needs Trust did a lot of work with North West Kent Alternative Provision. In fact, they had a celebratory event on Friday last week where they invited young people that they have been working with to the event and gave them awards and certificates. And there were quite a few young people who were in that position, that they were in alternative provision rather than in mainstream schools. In terms of measuring the impact, that's where the social value portal and another online platform that we're going to be using called Match My Project will come into their own, because the national TOMS specifically looks at things like people who are unemployed who've gone into work, people who are long-term unemployed who've gone into work as well, and they have to be in that job for a long time, i.e. retained, in order to measure that social value as well. So this is where the portal will help us to understand that impact and also tell the story, give us case studies and be able to celebrate all of that success with those young people as well. But yes, I do get your point. It's very, very long term with young people. If I'm talking to somebody in year 10, if they decide to go to university, it could be 5-6 years before they even enter the workplace. But we'll still be here in 2035. So, there are still opportunities even from that young age to build that talent pipeline. But I always put it against the context that we have an aging workforce in the built environment sector. Brexit and COVID have caused there to be shortages as well. So that's why we have the long-term education programme and then the shorter-term immediate, let's get people upskilled, retrained on site now in terms of the employability programme.
All right. Lauren, thank you very much for all the work. Kevin, thank you. Excellent work. Look forward to ongoing updates. That's for noting. Thank you very much. Jen, investment plan update.
Yes, so obviously Julia's apologies on leave, so asked me just to cover her report today. So again, taking a report with Red, just quickly starting with the 22-23 expenditure. As reported before, we've got 10.23 million capital available this year, and the actual spend at the end of September was 2.4 million. In terms of the capital forecast outcome at the end of this year, I'd like to apologise. Table 1 isn't quite correct in your report. But I'd like to confirm that our current forecast outturn is 10.4 million, so we're £200,000 over programmed, which we would expect to be very much at this point in time. That over programmed figure of 10.4 is a slight reduction on the outturn figure presented in September, and that is just due to us negotiating early exit on the last contracts. But yeah, apologies for that error in table 1. In terms of the programme revenue position, we spent 223,000 in September, and we're still showing an outturn of 1.3 million expected, which is in line with our budget. I think otherwise, all project progress as normal is detailed in Annex A. As you can see, that the programme level risks in sections 3 are starting to affect various projects, a number of which are further work has been undertaken to review costs and if necessary project approvals, and that work is ongoing as noted in Annex A. And then just lastly, from a health and safety perspective, there have been no incidents reported, and instances of any EBC owned sites summarised in table 5 are relatively minor. That's it. Thank you. News report.
All right, board, any comments? John, you
Just
come
a
in
question
there.
on the money. I know it's an unfair question to you, but on the money to stewardship transport utilities, we haven't seemed to have even some crackings on at all yet. What's the nature of the problem? It's fast track and that sort of item.
Yes, and some of that spend is us awaiting some budget approval as well from as well. That's I think maybe, but again, I'd have to I'll look into John's and Julie as to why they're
If it is fast track for the board itself, then we put representatives on that up and then take the message back to them to be a bit more engaged.
No, thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you, John. Thanks for that. Nick.
My only comment as health and safety champion was, were there any near misses? And are we recording those? That is near misses, it gives the train.
I know we do record near misses, but they're not shown here, so I can't confirm, but I'll make sure that for next month we have a near miss box shown in table 4.
All right, great, thank you. That's for noting. Move on to the next paper, which again is you, Jen, the development update.
Yes, so this is a sort of a new standing item that just focuses on the development activities for the corporation. So starting with Ebbsfleet Central, been mentioned a couple of times already today, but the outline planning application has been submitted and since validated. So there's a live planning reference shown in the report. So that's good progress. In terms of our progress to secure a development manager to support us to bring forward our first phase of development, that is ongoing. The final tender evaluation is in progress, and we're still on track to notify the successful bidder at the end of October. So they will then start during the latter part of November. And then finally on Ebbsfleet Central, we've been able to procure a new master planning design team. We had a large number of bids through the first of the 2 stages of that process. Those have been evaluated and 5 bidders have been invited through to the second stage, which is the invitation to tender, which is now commenced. So that contract is still on track to be awarded in January 2023. In terms of the temporary development area, obviously, as we reported previously in July, we took the decision to hold work and to reset that project, as we discussed slightly earlier. We've also been doing work to bring the current work to a conclusion to enable that reset. Very much internally, the project team are doing a comprehensive review of the projects, reappraising the objectives, reconsidering constraints, etc., ahead of that reset, and as required, commissioning additional work to support that project coming through to a new sort of business case process. And similarly for Grove Road, the last site in the report, again, that project following a decision in July is being reset. The outline planning application that was submitted has been withdrawn, and the team are working on new options and that reset again, which will go back to the board in due course once direction travel has been identified. So everything from me.
Good, thanks, Jen. Any comments on that, board?
Yeah, could we have a link to a sort of helpful planning application summary slash the DAS or whatever you think is the easiest document for us as a board to get a sense of feel of the application.
Yeah, that's fine. We've been putting together a sort of a guide to the application, where obviously there are a mass of documents, but that's fine. Yes, give us a little bit of time to get that out.
Yes, of course.
And one thing, the board, just to reassure the board that in terms of Thamesway and Road as we option here, the board expressed desire eagerness to not just be presented with a final solution, but to be involved in that option process. So when we reach that point, we'll be bringing those shortlisted options through to the board.
That's great. Thank you, Ian. When are we envisaging that?
We still, the initial working groups, so internal working groups have both established across both projects and are starting to go through that iterative process. So I would expect engagement with the board in maybe a pre-board session, either probably early in the new year would be my best guess.
Great. I think it would be good to have a pre-board session.
Yeah,
happy to. Great. All right. Excellent. Those are due for notes, Jen. That then brings us to the final part of today's agenda. Gerard, Finance and Operations Report.
Thank you, Chair. And the report in front of you shows the position as at the 30th of September, so the midpoint halfway through the financial year. At section 2, we are the operational budget, so our overall revenue budget. Our budget was set way back at the early part or the latter part of last financial year, and did assume that we would have an increase in our headcount and following sort of a notification of our capital budget. Fortunately, that certainty around the capital budget still hasn't been received, so recruitment has been delayed. Hence, we are generating savings in our pay budget. We are able to reallocate, but for the first time, we are flagging up to the board that at this midpoint year, we expect an underspend to occur in the region of about 170,000 overall. Our budget is made up of an allocation from government, from our sponsor department, but also being able to retain and utilise receipts. Against that overall pot, we are flagging up that there is to be an underspend come March. So that's new at this position. Obviously, we've reviewed that position. We are looking to see if we can bring forward any spend for future years to utilise some of that underspend. Obviously, we won't just go and spend taxpayers' money for the sake of spending. If the money needs to be offered back to the department, then that can be considered as well. In section 3, we've mentioned about the capital budget, which Jen has just explained. Section 4 has talked about the recruitment that has been undertaken. And then section 5, some housekeeping that we need to seek board approval for. And you'll see at Annex B, the flexible working policy. As it notes at 5.22, in HR terms, the word flexible is used quite a lot. We've tried to clarify that flexible working is an opportunity for staff to formally request a change to their contractual working pattern. So it's that policy, that issue that we're seeking board approval on today. And then following the ARAC, the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee meeting in September, a couple of documents are presented as again seeking approval. A or an updated version of the standing financial instructions, our SFIs. It's basically undergone a sort of complete redrafting and updating to try and make it more user friendly. And also to note that ARAC, having reviewed their terms of reference, didn't make any changes to it, but did want it to come forward to note no changes have been proposed and that they will continue to work with those terms of reference.
Thank you, Gerard. Board, are there any, we have some recommendations, have made some decisions here actually.
Yes.
To approve the new EDC flexible working policy, the updated standard financial instructions and the ARAC terms of reference unchanged. Are there any comments on those? Are people happy with the recommendation?
Happy with those.
Happy with those. I just had a question on something else, but
All right, good. So we'll assume that those three are approved. But Neil, you had a question.
I think Gerard, last time I asked about additional expenditure on comms and you explained RCT. We doing something special that means that we're spending more than anticipated.
Following sort of board discussions around revamping our website, which is in universal approval that we should look to update the website, seeking to do that. Also around sort of the imaging and use of particular software could be used to enhance our digital offer. So there is an amount been added to the budget to consider those options. Whether that gets spent or not is again one of those considerations. How much can be achieved by it or not.
But a subset of improved communications.
What the ICT? No, I think.
I'm asking about the
ICT.
ICT.
75%.
75,000. Just we upgrading or what are we doing? Is it
on the ICT lines? Yeah, apologies. Yes, we are looking to enhance the audio visual capability, in particularly in this room and next door. To enhance rather than rely on particularly bits of equipment that we're looking at to make sure that we can get a good experience for all users of the equipment. We've found that the equipment that we have purchased has been adequate, but there has been some expression that it's not really fit for purpose. So we are looking to enhance that, and the solution, the costs of that are being considered broadly to do everything we hope in terms of microphones, soundproofing, display screens, microphones, that sort of thing. We're looking in that sort of region.
That is something which we obviously didn't anticipate. And is that so that we can enhance virtual meetings, or
Yes,
what's the reason?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would, so I would say that our current ranges are not adequate. We rely on the hubs, which were purchased when very early days of the pandemic. They were a product that the department were using. So in the absence of anything else, we went to them. They're actually only designed for quite small meetings, and we should, the recommendation is you shouldn't be more than 6 foot from the hub for it to be effective. Sound quality is generally quite poor. We rely on this. It's generally not very good, and obviously we hold a lot of meetings now. It's not just the board. We have a lot of virtual meetings, and in this space particularly, they does perform very well. So yes, it is about enhancing that, which we hadn't anticipated at the beginning of the year.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for that.
I would just say we have in the past, at this point in the year, we have sometimes identified that there is a potential for underspend. Doesn't mean to say we will underspend, because we can still look to see whether we could utilise that RDEL for the great good of the community and our efforts here. So as Joe said, we will be looking to see whether we can utilise some of that, or all of it if we can, for it's a very good use.
There's also an amount in there to try and resolve the long-standing issue you had with the planners being able to access the planning software that they utilise, and actually means at the moment they have to have 2 laptops to resolve it. 1 laptop.
7 years accounting, so you know, I'm optimistic.
All right, good. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Gerard. That, I think, then brings us to the end of the part 1 part of our meeting. We have had, as always, some great questions from members of the public. Responses to those written questions will be posted on our website. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at the next board meeting. Thank you.